Yes, everybody, welcome back to Talking Wolves. Welcome back to a brand new match preview on the channel. Hope you guys are keeping well. We're back and Wolves are still winless. I hate to say that. It's been frustrating to say it for the last few weeks or so. But Wolves still searching for their first league win of the season as we travel to Brentford this weekend. As always, going to be giving my thoughts, the latest team news. We'll have the opposition perspective later on in the video as well. Before we kick off though, guys, I did mention it on one of the podcasts last week or the week before, is that I'm currently participating in an event alongside Prostate Cancer UK, Prostate United, where you've got to run, walk or cycle every day throughout October. And of course, I'm part of the way into that now, 4 days into it. If you guys want to contribute towards my fundraising page, it does mean a hell of a lot. So I'll make sure I leave a link to that in the description down below if you are. And answer me this, guys. Is this game a must-win for Gary O'Neill? Because there's been a lot of pressure on the current Wolves head coach. We're still winless in the Premier League. And I think a lot of people, including myself really, have earmarked this game against Brentford as a game that really he has to win. Now, part of me thinks that Wolves and Fosun are going to give him probably until the early part of November when the quote-unquote easier fixtures start to rock up. But certainly, games like this are games where Wolves have to really be getting points out of. You know, this fixture last season, Wolves had one of the most comfortable victories of the season, beating Brentford 4-1 away last year, albeit Nathan Collins having a bit of a disaster to help Wolves, of course. But it's really a big game, I think, for Gary O'Neill because, you know, look, next we've got the international break, but then the next Premier League fixture is against Manchester City, which you never want to write off Premier League games, but it doesn't get much tougher than that. And then we play Brighton away, which again is a tough game, although I do think Wolves can go toe to toe with the Seagulls. But this game is big, I think, for Gary O'Neill. Definitely a winnable game, but if he loses, there's more pressure and there'll be even more shouts for him to move on. We have it quite a lot in the replies to our posts on social media and on my videos here on YouTube as well. But I really think that Wolves need a win. Once again, in his pre-match press conference to say, he said Wolves are ready. But he said that against Liverpool. I felt we gave a fairly spirited performance against Liverpool, but just a couple of silly errors cost us in the end. And of course, there was a little bit of criticism against Gary O'Neill and his style of play in that game against Liverpool. So hopefully he tweaks things. Hopefully he takes the game to Brentford a little bit more. We've had a mixed start to the season, but a tough start as well, you know. And they've been really quick out of the blocks. The last 3 Premier League games, although they haven't won any of those 3, they've scored within the first minute. So Wolves really do have to be aware of that. We talk about that a little bit more in the opposition preview later on in the video as well. And in terms of availability for them, a couple of players coming back this weekend, but you know, a lot of top quality key players out for Brentford. So on paper, it looks like it may well be a good time for Wolves to face the Bees. But Wolves themselves, Gary O'Neill has today confirmed team news. No real big updates in terms of players out or anything like that. Craig Dawson's still sort of 50-50, I would say, with back in training, but not really to a decent level as of yet. Santi Bueno, who came off with a slight concern last week against Liverpool, is okay. So you're probably going to see a very similar, if not the same lineup to what we saw last weekend against Liverpool. Maybe a change to Jean-Luc the Bellegarde, who seemed to struggle. Probably a player that works well with how Gary O'Neill wants to play, but certainly in terms of level of performance, I don't think he was anywhere near good enough last weekend against Liverpool. Someone like Forbes came on and added that little bit of excitement, but maybe, you know, more of an impact player. You know, you've got a lot of players on that bench who I think could make an impact. You know, Pablo Sarabia has not had a lot of games on. Rodrigo Gomez, who was fantastic throughout pre-season as well. So I will be intrigued, but, you know, even Tommy Doyle, you know, really pressing for a start. So Gary O'Neill could surprise us and really mix it up for this weekend's game, to be completely honest. And if I give my predicted lineup, I think it will probably be Sam Johnston in goal once again. Back four will remain unchanged, in my opinion, with Ryan Aït-Nouri, Santiago Bueno, Totti Gomez, who I actually thought those two did okay last week, to be honest, and Nelson Semedo at right back. Midfield three, I mean, do you go with Andre, João Gomez and Lamina? On paper, again, probably is our best midfield three in terms of quality, but is it the best in terms of taking the game to Brentford and trying to win the game? I'm not so sure. And reluctantly, I think he's going to go unchanged as well with the front three. I think Bellegarde will keep his place, and I think Mateus Cunha will start with Strand Larsen as well. But there's players on that bench that are desperate to prove a point. I think Rodrigo Gomez is probably one of them. I would love to see him start. I don't know if the levels just aren't quite good enough for him in training right now. But there's a lot of good players on that bench that Wolves, and I think Gary O'Neill, if he's going to mix it up and freshen it up, this week could be that week for him, because I think there is pressure on the gaffer and he needs to make something work. He needs to get something, whether it's a point, whether it's 3 points. If Wolves come out at 5 o'clock tomorrow and have got another game, another loss and 0 points, there has to be serious questions asked, and there's going to be a hell of a lot of people disappointed come 5 o'clock on Saturday. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be watching the game live. I'm really hoping that I'll be able to watch it back for the podcast on that should release Monday or Tuesday morning. So Matt should be on review duty tomorrow, but we'll have the fans react out. Probably out early part of Sunday as well. But a big shout out to Mike from the Ealing Road podcast, who sat down with me to talk all things Brentford ahead of tomorrow's game between Brentford and Wolves. We talked to him about life after Ivan Toney, Thomas Frank, and how Brentford have started the Premier League season so far. So then, guys, delighted to be alongside Mike from the Ealing Road podcast, Brentford fan, to preview this weekend's game away at the Bees. Mike, thanks for joining me, man. How you keeping?
Yeah, all good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thank you, all good. Interesting games with Brentford, because I think on paper, Wolves fans go into these sort of games thinking, oh, it's a winnable fixture. And I'm sure Brentford fans are thinking the same, especially this season with how we've been struggling. But bar the sort of the away fixture last year where Wolves came out clear winners, there have been very close games between the two teams. So I am looking forward to this one. Wolves desperate for a win. But how have you felt the season's gone so far for Brentford? We're sort of 6-7 games in. How's it been so far?
Yeah, it's been tough. I think in a lot of ways, our start to the season's been similar to yours, in that we played a lot of good teams very early on. Our away fixture run at the start of the season, we played Liverpool, Man City, Spurs, and we got United next. So the games we've expected to pick up points, we have. Slightly disappointed to draw against West Ham last weekend, considering the performances we put in at Man City and Spurs, for example. But yeah, the games that we've expected to actually get some points from, we have taken points from at home to Palace and Southampton. And then to kind of have good performances away at City, I feel like there was a lot on that game, because we always play pretty well against City, and we probably should have been 2 or 3-0 up in the first kind of 20 minutes. But I think the West Ham game, to kind of come out the back of the Spurs game, which was a little bit poor defensively from our point of view, it was a little disappointing not to kick on, but it's not the end of the world. We're only 6 games in. And yeah, like you said, I think the last time we played you at home was in a cup, and then the game before that was when Nathan Collins decided or forgot what team that he signed for and gave like 3 goals away in that game. So let's hope that he remembers this time that he's actually signed for Brentford.
Yeah, no, we spoke about that on our podcast as well. He had an absolute stinker that game, Collins. Yeah. Probably his best game in a Wolves shirt, and he wasn't even wearing the Wolves shirt. So I see sort of going into this game as well, Mike, that you guys have got a few injury problems in terms of the sort of the squad availability at the moment. You're missing quite a few players. Is there sort of worries going into this game for Brentford fans, or are you confident with the quality that you've still got available at the moment?
No, it's worrying. Brentford have got a terrible record with injuries over the last couple of seasons. We still don't have a recognised out-and-out first-choice fullback at the club. Aaron Hickey was supposed to be our right-back for this season, but he's out again for another season, which means he's missed 2 years of football. Wow. Rico Henry, coming back from an ACL injury, was supposed to return after the international break, but hasn't yet. I feel like there's Thomas Frank comes out in his press conferences and he says this player will be back, and you always have to take it with a pinch of salt, because they just you end up never seeing them again, or just not seeing them again for a long time. But no, it's definitely worrying in terms of the injuries we picked up so early in the season. I think we've got 8 first team players out, and there's an argument that those 8 first team players could all be in the starting lineup. So it is quite worrying. I think we might have Christian Norgard back, who is very reliable. He's our club captain, and when we've not had him in the last 2 games against Spurs and West Ham, it's really told. But it's definitely worrying. I think once we started the season with Wissa and Bumo and Sharda up top, and those 3 were absolutely electric in the first few games, and we've lost Wissa now. for a couple of months. But like I said, it could be 4 or 5, knowing Brentford's medical team. Now we've lost him. We do lose quite a lot going forward, but I'm not worried. We showed enough against West Ham that if we actually take it to teams, we can cause problems even though we've got injuries. But I think to have that amount of injuries so early on in the season is definitely, I don't know, there's something going on with the Brentford medical team.
No, we've been the same. I mean, squad depth wise, on paper at the start of the season when everyone's available, we look okay. But typically, the one area for us is centre back, which we didn't really strengthen in, and we've had a few injury problems there, and we quite like there as well. But seems to be Wolves are in a similar sort of situation with that as well. But one player that you mentioned there, Jan, we were quite heavily linked with him, to be fair, and
Yeah.
a lot of Wolves fans are quite excited about him. I sort of saw a split sort of opinion from Brentford fans. I think a few fans really wanted him to stay. I think a few fans were open to selling him, but probably mainly due to the value and maybe his age a little bit. But what were your thoughts on that at the time? Were you sort of really hoping Whistle would stay, or were you open to the idea of letting him go?
The thing is, with the way that he started the season, if you'd have asked me sort of before he got injured, I'd have said no, I want him to stay. But when the Wolves links were there, I think it was like 30 million, or those were the rumours or something like that. We went on our podcast and we said we'd be kind of indifferent about it to make 20 million profit on a player who has kind of been was Ivan Toney's understudy when he was at the club. Didn't really get many opportunities from the off. It would always be Ivan Toney starting up top. But this season, the way he started, I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing. He started really well. He's linking up with Mbeumo really well. But at the time, when you guys were linked with him, we went on our podcast and we did say, if we can make some money, it's not the worst thing to happen in terms of. But at the same time, we also said if he stayed, we'd be absolutely delighted as well because it's just more options. And now with the injuries that we've got, it turns out to be pretty good business in terms of keeping hold of him.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned as well Ivan Toney. He was a big loss because I suppose from an outsider and a lot of people looking in, sort of when you think about Brentford, Ivan Toney was that player, and obviously moved on now to Saudi Arabia. A little bit of a shock, to be fair. I thought he would stay in and around the Premier League at least. But I mean, how big of a loss is he? Do you think Brentford have so far adjusted to life, or do you think they'll continue to adjust to life without Ivan Toney?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a big loss. I think when he was at the club, his style of play kind of dictated the way we'd play as a team. Thomas Frank, I think, quite smartly recognised that he's one of the best strikers in the league, so play to his strengths. I don't want to call him a target man because I think he's more than that, but in terms of his hold-up play and his passing ability and his ability and his link-up with Brian Mbeumo, we've lost him, but we've kind of evolved into the next stage, or kind of more similar to the Brentford that came up from the Championship in the way that we play, or especially that team that had Brian Mbeumo, Ollie Watkins, and Said Benrahma in it. In terms of we're playing the ball along the ground a lot more. We're playing out from the back, which makes me quite nervous a lot of the time. But our build-up play and the way we've adapted to life without having a man up there who wins every single duel is positive, and we saw it in spurts when he was out during the ban, but it probably wasn't as sustained. But now we've had a bit more. Now Thomas Frank's had a bit more time to work on it over a whole pre-season. It is good, but I do sometimes when you're away at a big six side, and I say that Brentford having played really well against Liverpool and City, and for a large part of the game against Spurs as well, we actually have played well. But when the pressure is on, to have an Ivan Toney up top who can take a lot of pressure off you just by winning a foul or holding the ball up and allowing defenses and midfields to get up the pitch, it is a big miss in that sense. But in terms of playing without Ivan Toney, we've had quite a bit of experience with it, and I feel like you mentioned it in terms of when you think about Brentford, you did used to think about Ivan Toney, and now we kind of need to get past that because he's gone, and there's no love lost between Brentford fans and Ivan Toney anyway. So
yeah, I mean, there was always controversies with him, I suppose, with things he said behind the scenes, or obviously with the banning order that he had. And I suppose you guys are used to, a big part of last season was without him anyway, and you coped, you coped quite well, really. It's interesting what you say in terms of style of play and so on, because I think the sort of playing out from the back has come under the spotlight quite a lot, especially this weekend on Wolves against Liverpool. I mean, we were chasing the game and playing it across our back line. I think Gary Neville in particular was sort of quite critical of that. And yeah, I mean, again, as a neutral, sometimes it can be quite pleasing on the eye. I've spoke to a lot of people that aren't Wolves fans and say how good Wolves are and how good the football is they play, but ultimately it's a results business. And as Wolves fans, it's quite frustrating to watch. Sort of going on to that, I mean, Thomas Frank, an unbelievable job at Brentford. And I remember when the first year you came up, and I spoke to a few Brentford fans, and I think they were just there to enjoy the adventure. I don't think there was any real expectation of staying in the Premier League. And now you just sort of expect to see Brentford in and around that sort of mid to top of the bottom half of the table, and it's been like that ever since. What are the expectations now with Thomas Frank? What can he do? Because he's been linked with some big clubs. You guys are extremely happy with how he's still been getting on at Brentford.
Yeah, of course. No, I adore Thomas Frank. I think the links, which linked him to the United jobs and the Chelsea jobs over the summer, that was kind of a little sign that maybe he's not going to stay at Brentford forever. Which I feel like I can't really imagine Brentford and Thomas Frank not being at Brentford. But no, I think the job that he's done in terms of now Brentford being an established Premier League side is goes under the radar a little bit, considering we came up to the Prem and it was quite novel and it was going to all these grounds and every week and stuff. Now that's kind of worn off a little bit. We've spent quite a bit of money, to be fair. The recruitment since we've come up to the Prem hasn't been as good as it was in the Championship, but that's just a consequence of being in a better league and competing with bigger clubs. But still, it's an amazing job. A club the size of Brentford to now go into our 4th season in a row. I'm not surprised there's been admirers from other clubs regarding Thomas Frank, but I hope he stays. I'm not sure if he can bring us any higher. We almost got into Europe a couple of seasons ago, and one season in Europe would just be unbelievable before he goes. But I feel like it is probably a matter of time, because people might be, or clubs might be, cottoning on to the fact that we've had some really big results, especially that season where we almost got Europe, beating Man City twice, beating Liverpool, beating Spurs. There's not a lot of teams that do that, and Thomas Frank he's proved that he can kind of get those results. So if he can do it at a club like Brentford, there's no reason why he can't do it somewhere bigger.
Yeah, I mean, for you guys, just a year in Europe. Obviously, we had Europa League. Unfortunately, it was interrupted by COVID, but unbelievable, mate. And we're all quite jealous of Villa right now in the Champions League as well. But it's an unbelievable experience, to be honest. But it's crazy because I think like you guys have never really, correct me if I'm wrong, never really been in trouble. Like we don't look at the end of the last sort of 3 or 4 years. I've never looked and think, Brentford are in a bit of trouble here. I think the one year when you brought Christian Eriksen in, you were sort of in and around sort of not trouble as such, but in January really kicked on. Second half of the season, you were fantastic, and that might be the year that you're talking about there. But he's done a fantastic job, really. You talk about the style of play. Has he sort of? Can you see a clear difference in the style of play without Ivan Toney, or are players still doing a similar role to what they were doing towards the end of last season?
No, there's a massive difference. There's not as many long balls. Like I mentioned, sometimes we're playing out from the back. The keeper's reluctant to kick it long, but I feel like once we get into those, there's an area like against Man City, the amount of turnovers we had in Man City's half to really take the game to them at the Etihad. It was like, wow, I didn't really recognise that in terms of the way we played against them when we had Ivan Toney.
Yeah,
there is a massive difference between the way that we play now, and I feel like if Wissa had stayed fit and if he didn't get injured at Man City, our front three that I mentioned of Mbeumo, Shada and Wissa, it has the capabilities, that front three, to hurt any team in the league just because they interchange, they're so fluid. Wissa's hold-up capabilities aren't that much further back from what Ivan Toney could provide. And then when you've got Kevin Shada, who's just got electric pace, and Brian Mbeumo's been on fire this season. So in terms of the midfield, that's not changed that much. In terms of the defence, it has, because there's a lot more pressure on the centre halves to be better with their feet. Nathan Collins has actually been phenomenal this season. I can't fault him whatsoever. Ethan Pinnock, who is normally one of our kind of... We Brentford fans rave about Ethan Pinnock, and we say that he's one of the most underrated centre halves in the league. But I think he's kind of struggling to come to terms with the new way that we're playing. There's been a few times where he's been caught on the ball or passes astray that go into midfield and get intercepted. And when you play against teams like Spurs, who can put you to the sword in those situations, it's tough. But there's definitely been a bedding in process. It's going to be interesting to see. I think it's going to be a really good game. I don't know about you. On Saturday, I've been doing my preview on my channel, and just looking at the way Wolves set up and how you like to play. I think it's going to be quite end to end. But that's not great for the neutral. But
yeah, no, I'm intrigued because I think, obviously, we're still winless in the league right now, and I don't think, regardless of result, I don't think Gary O'Neill will go on Saturday. But I think there's a hell of a lot of pressure on him to get something out of this game. It really does need a win. I think he'd probably take a point right now because, it's not an easy place to go. Although I think I was looking earlier, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've lost at your place since we've come into the Premier League, to be fair. We have had close games, but I think your 2 wins against us have both come at Molineux. One last year and one the first season that you were in the Premier League as well. But I think it's going to be an intriguing game. I think it's going to be quite important how Wolves start this game because you boys, was it the first minute in the last 2 or 3 games that you've scored goals? I mean, what happened there? What's the secret there? Is there some sort of kick-off glitch that Thomas Frank's got going on? Or what's happening?
Yeah, it seems like that FIFA kickoff glitch, but no, it's so Keith Andrews. We had Bernardo Quaver.
Yeah.
We had Bernardo Quaver as our set piece coach. He got pinched by Chelsea, and we brought in Keith Andrews, who I think was working at. I can't remember where he was working before, but it was definitely towards the end of the bottom of the league, or maybe even the Championship before then. But he's come in, and Thomas Frank's been giving him praise in his post-match interview, saying it's all planned. He kind of views it as a set piece, in terms of just like ball normally goes back to the centre halves. We overload that kind of final third area of the pitch, and we just play for the flick-ons and play for the second balls. And yeah, to do it 3 weeks in a row, the second time was weird enough, but then to do it for the third time, I was watching, I was just like, what on earth is going on?
It's like you've got a head start straight away though, isn't it? Like, you barely kick the ball and you sort of, got that lead. And I mean, just quickly looking at the results there though, well, they were against the big teams, and sometimes you need those sort of that look against the big teams. Unfortunately, you lost against Spurs, and you haven't won any of the 3 actually. It's happened, which is frustrating for you guys. But it's just intriguing. You very rarely see it, but for it to happen 3 Premier League games in a row. But yeah, that was Keith Andrews, ex-Wolves as well. He ended up joining West Brom, which I don't think too many Wolves fans were happy about at the time. But so, what are you thinking, Mike, in terms of a score prediction maybe for Saturday? What are you thinking?
I think it's a big game for both teams. Considering the start that you've had, and like the teams that you've played. I don't know with Gary O'Neill, because he kind of got the job, turned it around, didn't really have a summer. Now he's had a full summer, but then the start has been so harsh on Wolves. So I can see why it's a big game in terms of, you've got a game now that you can actually expect to get points from instead of be hoping to get points from, in terms of those teams that are further up the table. I think it's going to be a 2-2 draw. I think your midfield really scares me. Matheus Cunha specifically scares me. I think he's absolutely fantastic. I'm surprised no one came in for him over the window, because I think he's just top notch. I think his finishing's come on a lot in the last season or the last couple of seasons. So I remember he always used to be a good dribbler, but just the end product. But the goal against Villa, wow, just to win the ball back and smash it in. So yeah. There's definitely aspects of Brentford's games that I think can hurt Wolves. There's aspects of Wolves' game that I think can hurt Brentford. So I'm going to go high score and draw. And I think that's probably a decent result for both sides going into the international break.
Yeah, I think Wolves need something. I'd be intrigued for people listening or people in the comment section if they would they take a draw, because there's a real split in our fan base on even sort of in that sort of Talking Wolves community, because it's sort of 50-50. I'm getting posted videos, and within 10 minutes, I've got people saying Gary O'Neill out in the comments. And then there's other people sort of siding with him. I think, we get to November, that's a much easier run of I say easier, you know what I mean? But on paper, an easier run of fixtures for us. But Wolves can't risk getting to November, giving Gary O'Neill that time and continuing to lose those games. So, I mean, after you guys, we've got Brighton away and we've got City as well. So it doesn't get any easier. So I think, and this isn't any disrespect to Brentford, on paper, this is probably Wolves' easiest game as such for to get points in. So I am intrigued. It's going to be a tough game. We've had tight games with you guys before. Thomas Frank has done the dark arts on us before, I can say. I mean, that's in the news a little bit more. The first year you were up with David Raya, somehow ripped his glove halfway through the second half. And, that was an interesting game. But, Mike, I really appreciate you jumping on. And, apart from Saturday, mate, all the best for the rest of the season. Where can people catch you and your podcast if they wish?
Yeah, at the Eden Road Twitter, at Eden Road Pod Instagram, Eden Road Podcast on YouTube. And I'll be putting out like a preview of this game on my personal channel, Mike Cliven 5, which was taking some highlights from the Wolves game. So if you want to check that out as well, go check that out on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll make sure I leave a link to those in the description down below. But thanks, Mike, for jumping on. I'll catch you next time, mate. Cheers.
Top man. Cheers, mate.
So big thanks to Mike. Once again, I'll leave a link to him and the videos down in the description down below. And do let me know your thoughts, guys, if you're watching on YouTube, in the comment section down below, your score prediction. And like I said at the start, is this a must-win for Gary O'Neill? If you're watching on the podcast apps such as Spotify or Apple, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button and like button if you're on YouTube as well. Until next time, guys, hopefully we are celebrating a win tomorrow evening. Look after yourselves, and I'll catch you on the next one. Come on, you Wolves.